Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I am AJ, and sitting across from me, my colleague, astute analyst, podcaster, whatever you want to call them,
Flunky.
Jason. Yeah. Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, AJ. It's a lovely fall morning, so doing great. You know, college football season's in, so that life seems normal for a little bit.
It is a good time when college football season's back in.
Uh-huh.
I'm loving it.
You're obviously a Georgia Bulldogs fan, right?
Of course, the national champions. We got to make sure we put that in there for people not to forget.
The number one team in the country.
Yes, the reigning champions.
Yep, and they're going to sweat all season until they get past Alabama in the in the SEC championship.
That's very, very true. Well, we're hoping.
Well, it looks like a pretty straight path there this season, doesn't it?
It does, but this past weekend kind of scared me a little bit. But
yeah.
It is what it is. It happens. It was a pretty rough weekend for all teams. It seemed like so.
Yeah,
well, most teams, I'll say.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, that was our football analysis.
What do you want to talk about? That's what we're going to do now, folks. We're moving over to a college football analysis program. So
yes, because we know all about that. No, today's episode, last week we talked about the understanding risk, which was a feed off of understanding opportunity. This episode, we're going to kind of pivot a little bit. Still considering all this stuff because we're still in our life series, but we wanted to bring back an older episode that we did when it was talking about the work-life school balance, because we did it from a college student's perspective. But now that we're in life and we're looking at from the career side, the later in life where you're dealing with your career, you're not in college, we thought it'd be a good idea to bring back this balance episode and do it from a work-life, and we just kind of dubbed it work-life other stuff balance when school's not a factor. Because I do think this is another area where a lot of people tend to struggle with. So what do you think about that?
Oh, yeah. So when we were doing that episode, we talked about then, should we expand this a little bit further? Because, this is pretty finite. But we are, reschooled, right? That is what our thing is. So we focus on school first. But I'm glad we finally had the time in our series to come back around to this because, it's something we need to talk about, no question. But wait, before we do, got to remind everybody, check us out on the website, reschool'd.com, reschool with the D, not an ED. Right? And hit us up on the social media profiles. That's where you can communicate with us, give us any questions you may have or anything like that. And of course, we need your stars and your support on your favorite podcasting platforms because that's how people know about us. That's how, we get served up as recommendation and all that jazz. So anyway, if you would, please give us those likes, give us those stars, give us that seal of approval.
What's that old saying? Help us help you.
Yeah, that's right. Help us help you.
So, today's quick question, because we're dealing with the work-life other stuff balance. I guess we're looking at the balance, but just in a different time of your life. Yeah. So much like the last episode when we did this, I want you to grade yourself A through F on your work-life other stuff balance in your current stage of life, like where you're at now.
Well, we talked about this during our work-life balance during school phase. I get really antsy, really nervous if I'm not doing something. So I have all these side projects, and these side projects happen to be work for me. This podcast, my website, writing, that kind of stuff. And I look at it as all work. So I would say I'm probably a little heavier on the work side. And, than I am on the what you would generally consider life side, but that's enjoyment for me. So you probably have to say it's just as easily in the life side. So that being said, I think how I like it to be, my balance is pretty good.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna say it's A minus. Yeah. What about you?
I think that you qualifying it the way you did, where you said, some of the stuff that you do would be almost perceived as work, but for you, it's kind of like life. It's your hobby. It's your passion. It's the stuff that makes you happy. I think it's important because it's going to be different for everyone. People are going to be able to see the balance of somebody else and go, man, you work too much. But if the work is a true passion, then it's really not work.
Yeah.
So,
I've told people before, I would rather do what I do most days than go sit on the beach or go hiking through the woods. Those are relaxing things, fun things for a lot of people. And just,
all right, you lost me on that one.
Yeah.
We're I was with you up until that point when you said you'd rather be doing that than the beach.
Oh yeah. Are you
yeah, because most of my stuff can be done on the beach. Like I could still go to the beach and do the work. So
yeah,
I could live with that. But no, I would say I'm well. It's hard for me to grade myself on this because I'm back in school, so I still have that school component in there. So and that's where most of my time is spent right now is the school. And then if you add on top of that, my wife being back in school doing the same program, that's even more. Like our balance right now is really off of what it normally is.
Well, at this point, school for you is 100% related to career advancement and things like that.
Absolutely.
So you can look at them kind of together. So you've got to be tip heavy on the scale of you're working more than you have life.
Yeah, short. It's just we look at it kind of as a short term sacrifice leads to a long term benefit. So we're willing to do that. And so obviously it's skewed more towards that, but I still think like it's not what it used to be for obvious reasons, but I still think I'm fairly balanced in the life side or the other stuff, what we call other stuff side. Because I still make time for different things. Like and we were talking about, it's just funny that we were talking about this at the beginning of the show, about the football, college football. I mean, I still watch my teams. It's not like I'm missing that. We have things that we go to with friends. Like we took our kids to or our girls to the high school football game this past Friday night. So we still made time for that. And so we still have that balance. It's obviously not where we would like it because of the school aspect and the stuff that we have to do there. Mm-hmm. But I would say with what we're working with right now, I'd say it's pretty good. So I would say it's probably about an A-, B+, minimum.
That's good. If you feel like that now, once you wind some of this stuff up, man, you're going to be living the life.
Oh, I'm going to be efficient as all get out. Like it's going to be an A+. I ain't going to be doing squat.
You're going to have everything on autopilot.
Exactly. I'm going to automate everything.
Well, you have done a number of accounting video series with me, so
just going to start letting that ride.
Plug that into your class, sit back, grade a few papers every now and then, you'll be good.
Are you kidding me? I'm just do it online and they grade it for me.
There you go. You need a teaching assistant. That's what you need.
Yeah, no kidding. Then I wouldn't be doing anything. Like I would be doing pretty much squat other than doing some, when I'm meeting class, doing some problems.
Oh, you got to do that research, man.
Yeah, I know. That's coming.
Yeah.
That's coming.
Well, let's talk about some work-life balance for how it's relevant to our students because anybody listening to this podcast because they're probably thinking, man, these guys,
we ramble
enough. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I want to start back at episode 16 when we did the work-life school balance.
Okay.
How do you think this topic of what we're talking about today, how do you think it's different from what we talked about back then? Like, how can we distinguish it to the listeners?
So, how in almost every episode I talk about opportunity, and then there's the opportunity generation, recognition, exploitation. I mean, that continues throughout your life, right? Mm-hmm. Back in school, what you're mainly doing is the opportunity generation and then creating awareness so you can recognize opportunities while they're there. So when you're heavy in that phase, everything is you're checking the box, you're developing the skills, you're getting the signaling or the credentials that will allow you to qualify for certain jobs and things like that. So everything's so forward looking, right? And it always seems like it's going to end, that there's some point in the future that you're going to transition. It's going to be this amazing career that you want. And then all of a sudden you realize that's really where it just begins, right? Then you actually have to start from the bottom to earn whatever you're looking for in terms of career progression, status, that type of thing. So, but it's a different feeling because in a way, it feels like that'll never end. It's easy to become complacent, lackadaisical, that type of thing. And it's easy to get overly involved, and that becomes your entire life to the exclusion of other things, right? I see that all the time in professional services firms, people that go to big law firms, consulting firms, things like that. Your job becomes every aspect of your life. So what I see it as different is this: you're starting on that path. You feel like what you were doing before, it just somehow it's different. That's why everybody looks back, no matter how difficult school was and stuff like that. They look back and say, "Oh, that was the best time of my life." And the reason is because it felt, one, there was a lot of camaraderie there, but it felt finite in nature. It was going to end, and the career doesn't. It just always feels like it's going. So if you're going to run that marathon, if it's going to be the journey, not the destination, where in school, it was very much everybody had their eye on that destination, but it seemed like somehow we enjoyed the journey more because it was finite. We took advantage of opportunities. That's the difference I see. Right now, we got to understand that it is a long run. This is something we're going to do probably for the rest of our life, or at least until advanced age, late 60s, early 70s, maybe even later, right? We're still going to be working. We're still going to be doing those things. So how do we balance that out to make certain that our life is what we want it to be in terms of personal fulfillment, time with friends and family, travel, personal development, all those things outside of I do this to earn a living.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I look at it from the perspective of, when we talked about it in episode 16, we were looking at it from a traditional student's perspective, meaning, you were working probably part-time, going to school full-time, and then you had your life, which is more of your social life. In this one, I kind of look at it as you have your career, so you're working full-time. You have your life, which is probably going to be more, depending on, again, what stage of your life you're in, could potentially be more of like a family life. Like you and I both have families, so that's what would kind of go into there. And then the other stuff that takes up some of our focus or some of our time, it's a different level of responsibility in this stage. Looking at it from this perspective, you have, back in college, you didn't have a whole lot of care. You were young enough to where, again, going back to our episode last episode of risk, you could take more risks back then because you can make up for them if you failed. Whereas this one, you're getting on up there in life, you don't have as much time to compensate for any failures. So there's the responsibility is a little bit more there. The possibility of a negative outcome from risks is a little bit more severe, possibly, depending on what it is. So I guess you would say there's a little bit more oomph behind it. There's a little bit more, reason to pay attention, if you will. And so, which kind of leads us to the next question is, do you think it's more important at this stage of your life for the balance, more so than you were in college?
Personally, yes, I do. Okay. Like I say, early on, if you don't do the work, you're not going to create opportunities for yourself later on. So there certainly needs to be some level of balance. But if you don't do that, right, if you don't do the minimum work, it affects you for so long for the rest of your life. Later on, you have the determination of what you want to do with your life. At any point, if you want to, leave and go live on the beach in Costa Rica, you can do that, right? Yeah. Or you can follow a more traditional path. You go to work 9 to 5 every day, or actually, let's be real, go to work 8 to 6 every day, and have a family and take 2 weeks vacation a year. And, your weekends, you're just decompressing, watching college football until you can start the next week, right?
Why you telling everybody my dirty secrets?
Yeah, right. I mean, there's two sides of that coin. So in my mind now, because this is life, this is the long haul, hopefully it's not going to end short, and, knock on wood, the work-life balance is going to be more important than ever. So exploring how you say, all right, this is important. I have to fit this in. How, every minute that you're not working is counterproductive to your career. There's no question. And that work may be networking, it may be other things like that, developing new skills, completing tasks, whatever, right? But every minute that you're not working, you are giving up some level of potential creation of an opportunity or advancement in what you're doing or whatever. But the question is, what's more worth it? Is it worth it more to enjoy your life given the responsibilities you have and everything like that? Or is it better to say, hey, look, maybe I'm going to try to make my millions, or maybe this is my life. Maybe I need to put those other things behind me and say that that's not going to be a part of my life from now on. Whichever,
Yeah.
right, you decide. And I've seen it decided both ways. I mean, obviously, I think I've seen probably the decision more in terms of I'm going to balance out as much of both of these as I can. But I've certainly seen a great deal of my life is my work, and that's it. I'm avoiding that. And I've even gotten to see a few people who just hang it up and say, look, I make enough money, do a tiny little bit of this. Other than that, I am literally going to live on a beach in Costa Rica. So, I, that's my long qualified answer. Which is more important? By all means now, right? But you still have to decide your balance.
Yeah, and I would say I'm on the same line where I do feel like it's more important now because we're in later part of our life. But one of the reasons why I think it's more important now than in college is, if you didn't, one of the things we talked about last in episode 16 is one of the things that can come from an improper balance of work-life school is this feeling of burnout. You get burned out real quick. But, now in life, you can still have the same thing. You can still get burned out, but I think the burnout's a little bit more detrimental. I think the impact that you can have from a burnout now in your life, because your burnout is probably going to come from your career, not your school as much, obviously, because if you're not in school now, but it'll probably impact your work, your career more. So if you get burned out on that, it could potentially have a more adverse effect than if you got burned out at school.
Yeah.
And that's reasons why. That's one of the many reasons why I think it's super important now to really understand the importance of that balance and the importance of learning that balance in school early on.
Yeah. And of course, burnout happens in school too, we know, right?
Oh,
I mean, especially for people who go on to graduate school immediately, like your medical school, law school, that type of thing. That's so long, right? The second round is just as long as the first, just about. And I went into law school immediately after college. I'm thinking now I probably should have taken a year off. It probably would have helped me a great deal, but I didn't. And because of that, I was kind of burnt out going in. And, I reduced my effort to as little as possible and I actually said, you know what, I need money more and started working, right? Where they seriously advise against that. But when you're facing that type of thing, all of a sudden you make decisions that will affect your life long term. Now, luckily, I can't say that affected my life negatively anyway, but it certainly had an impact. My grades weren't as good as they could have been, right? That type of thing.
Well, what are some things that you can think of now that may pop up that may hinder that balance, your ability to keep that balance?
So when I see people coming out of school and, I tell them, take all your risk early on, because if you do have the traditional desires for what naturally comes, early in your career, you tend to get married. Oftentimes you have kids not long thereafter. You incur obligations in the form of home, vehicle, things like that. You start getting pressure to save for the future, right? Everything from kids' college fund to retirement, things like that. Health insurance becomes a big deal because, if you're lucky enough where you're on mom and dad's health insurance up until you get out of school, then all of a sudden that's on you, and you realize exactly how expensive it is, particularly if you have a family. And all of these things taken together, it's just a massive amount of responsibility, right? So all of these responsibilities are the things that you're going to have to weigh against your work life. And everybody knows early on, right? Your job's going to be demanding. You're learning skills, things like that. It seems like you have to put more effort into what you're doing to get the same result than you will once you become a little more proficient. So you're working harder, you're having to concentrate more, you're balancing all of these things that are popping up in life. And then you say, well, what am I doing for me in terms of personal fulfillment and fun, right? Are you getting to go out there and, I don't know, exercise or play a team sport or enjoy some hobby? I know a lot of people are into playing video games and things like that. Like, are you getting to do those things? And is one of those, right? I can't tell you how many times I've heard spouses complain about their spouse, their significant other, playing video games, or perhaps going to play soccer or tennis or something like that, and they see it as taking away from family time.
Yeah.
But really, they're really trying to balance all three things, and it's very difficult for them.
Yeah. Well, I had 3 things written down. The first 2 were responsibilities and obligations, which you said both of those words, so that took that out of the way. My third thing, and I do think it potentially is maybe the bigger hindrance of being able to sustain that balance, I think I just wrote the word fear. I think the fear of not living up to what you have set as your goals, the fear of not taking on risk because you think you focus on the negative side more, the fear of giving up something in order to get something. I think all of those things, that they all encompass that, like I said, that one word of fear. Mm-hmm. I think that's a really big thing that can hinder that balance, especially too if you're somebody that is very career oriented. You're going to probably work 50 to 60 hours a week out of the fear of you not getting the next promotion, out of the fear of them looking at you not in the best of light. And I'm not saying in a negative light, just not in the optimal light. You're going to start doing things, moving time that you would be spending somewhere else to focus in on work because of that fear of you not being able to achieve what you're trying. I think that's a big, big problem. And again, it's a problem if it's negatively affecting your life. If it's not negatively affecting your life, then it's not really an issue. It could grow to be an issue, especially right now if you're so focused on work, and you're not in a relationship. When you get in a relationship, the expectation is that some of that focus is going to have to move over to your significant other. Mm-hmm. And if you don't learn that balance early on prior to that, it's going to be really hard to get to that point when you do make that leap of marriage or whatnot. So yeah, I would say fear. Fear would be my top choice as to what could hinder the balance.
And like I say, you could be scared of your significant other. So
you'd be terrified of that one. Yeah.
They might be able to bring the pain if you're not putting in the time. So
amen.
Not physically, but they can make your life a living hell.
Yes, sheer fear. All right, last thing. Let's give the listener some tips on achieving that balance that we're talking about now in this stage of life. So we're talking about the work, life, other stuff balance. Okay. What are some tips that you have for the listeners?
Set your personal priorities. Okay. We talked about these 3 things that are necessary, career, obligations to others, and then obligations to yourself. If you understand what you want, then hopefully you can balance your life in a way that allows you to move forward towards that goal, towards those objectives. So you got to start by understanding what you want out of life. Because once again, that's, if you know the target you're shooting at, you know everything else, right? So there you go.
My first one would be to understand that, at least in my opinion, life is not meant to be done alone. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to get married. It doesn't. I'm just saying there is a point in your life where you're going to have to rely on other people, whether it be friends, colleagues, significant others, spouses, whatnot. But once you get past the realization that it's better to do it, certain things with a group of people versus just take every task that comes to you alone, I think it'll start opening your eyes and opening more doors for you to be able to do more things and understand the importance of that community side. That would be my first tip.
Okay. That's a good one. Number 2 for me is, so I talked about those 3 things that you have to balance. So you start with understanding yourself. Part 2, talk with your significant other.
You stole mine. I hate you.
What's that?
I said you stole mine. I hate you.
I stole your number 2. Sorry about that. Well, I mean, so we're on the same page on this one. You got to.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to talk to your significant other. Make sure their goals, their objectives are in alignment with yours, right? Because you're working on this together. Even if you don't have a significant other, if you have kids, anyone who depends on you in that way, you need to talk to them and make certain that there's at least some commonality of understanding there, because it's going to affect your action. It's going to affect your life, but it's also going to affect theirs, right?
Yeah,
their actions are going to affect yours too. So
I would take that one step further and say, even with, you're talking about with the spouse or whatnot and talking about I would say have an accountability partner. Even if it's not your spouse, have somebody that you can talk to say, okay, here are what I plan on doing. This is my goals. And they're going to be the one that keeps up with it. But also in that communication, you're saying that you do want to have a balance. So they also let you know, hey, you're spending a ton of time on work. And if it's necessary, it's necessary. But you also need to look at the other side.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't gone out lately. You haven't, you're missing meals because you're working so hard. These are healthy things that you need to be doing too. So I would take that one step further and say, if you don't have, even if you have a spouse or whatnot, but just have an accountability partner. If you have a spouse, then that would be your accountability partner.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So number 3, the third group there is the job.
Yeah.
Okay. Set your expectations for life and understand that what your job is going to contribute to it. We too often say, our work is everything for us. Our work is our life. Well, it's a part of it, most certainly. So if a job is not right for you, or it's not moving you to where you want to be, then do something about it, right? And of course, your job, if you have to move jobs or take something different, it probably will affect every other aspect of your life. So they are obviously always parts of the consideration, right? But if there is some way you can be proactive and say, look, for my life to be what it needs to be, I need to work during these hours. I need to start earlier, leave earlier, or start later, leave later because I want my kids to school. Or if it's a 4-10 work week, or if there's remote working, or if it's a location thing, or if there's the potential for promotion versus not, or whatever, or just a lateral transfer, or even a demotion in some situations works. Whatever that may be, take these steps to be proactive so that your job ends up being what you want it to be.
I think my last one would be, and this is something that I need to kind of practice what I'm preaching, because I still struggle with this, but I think my last one would be to exercise patience when it comes to things popping up that affect that balance that you're not, you can't expect, you can't plan for, especially when you have families. When you have kids, things pop up all the time, and you may have your week set as to what you're going to be doing at different times, where your focus is going to be, what you need to get done. And inevitably something pops up and throws kind of a monkey wrench in those plans. And I think your ability to practice patience will help with that balance, because you're not gonna see this event that pops up. You're not gonna see it as problematic. You're gonna see it as something that you just need to, adapt and overcome pretty easily. I mean, it's usually not something that's major, especially if you're talking about kids. I mean, it's just something it's more of an inconvenience than it is anything that's going to take away a significant amount of time. One of my things that I struggle with, just because to me it's such a big, but this is a selfish side of me. To me, it's such a big time killer, is other kids' birthday parties. Now, I love my kids' birthday parties, of course. That's the selfish side. But, when they get invited to other parties, all I can think of is, God, that's an hour and a half of me sitting there, and not being able to really do anything. But I realize that is part of that life balance that I need. So my last tip would be to, practice the patience, work on the patience when things come up, because that way, when things that are significant comes up, you have the confidence going into them that you can overcome those and still maintain that balance.
Absolutely. Well,
do you have any other ones?
No, I think that's a good one to end it on. That's a poignant note, and I hope people listening took something away from this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been good.
Yeah, before we go, just going to remind everybody one more time, please let us know what you want to hear about, because, like I say, we're trying to identify the things that mean the most to you. You guys have been good about sending in messages and things like that, so keep it up. Again, if there's anything happening in your life and you want a shout out of any sort, whether it's on social media or whether it's on the show, just let us know, and hopefully we'll be able to work that in. So,
absolutely. Well, we hope you enjoyed it. We hope to see you next time. Until then, goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.